I organize and mobilize communities, especially communities of colors that have been impacted historically around issues of environmental justice. The fact that we still have, cities that are deeply divided and low-income communities are carrying all the burden, and oftentimes the burden of environmental impact they did not create, that's injustice. Systemically, you have racist policies, but also you have zoning and legislations that really were built to marginalize communities of color. And that's not by accident, it's by design. So, I mean, in Manchester, you have affluent communities, but also you have low-income communities. In affluent communities, they have access to open green space. They have access to safer streets with bike lane. But then when you look at low-income communities, they don't have access to green space, lead in water, but also lead paint in houses. They don't have access to fresh food and vegetables. So that's the disparity that you see when you come to Manchester. Basically, your zip code determines your health, but also it determines all the benefits when it comes to environment. We have what we call the tree streets: Maple, Beech, Pine, and Chestnuts. These are one-way double-lane streets. In 2019, the city deemed these streets to be dangerous and therefore made change by eliminating those double lane and including a bike lane, but also an accessible sidewalk. Unfortunately, we are 4 years later and we're still waiting for the city to implement the pilot program in other part of the city that's low income and communities of color. But you have vehicles traveling at 65 and sometimes 70 miles per hour. That's a highway speed. That's not a residential speed. And therefore, because it mimics the highway, we call it neighborhood highways. Only 1 out of 5 folks in those neighborhoods have or own a vehicle. So which means that a lot of those vehicles are traveling, they're not from residents of those neighborhoods. So those neighborhoods and those communities are they're just carrying the burden. It was very obvious that there wasn't any timeline to have the same reconfiguration happening south of Bridge Street. Because of the communities, because of personal stories they're heard, now it becomes a priority. We apply for a grant, and hopefully when we get this grant, will help for a planning study to see how this corridor and these streets could also be reconfigured. You mobilize the community, you organize the community, but also you empower them. And they start to advocate for their own needs by calling the elected officials. Well, that flipped the script. Having them around the table and meeting with them on a monthly basis and build those trust and relationship, I think that has been a win for us. So you have business owners, you have nonprofit organizations, but also you have just individuals who are passionate to see change. So although the pandemic has been a challenge, but we found ways to get in touch with those folks, to engage them, to mobilize them, to make them community advocates. And when you have that, that's when change really starts. That's when sustainable change starts.